Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. A really special episode today. We're going to be talking all about spatial. And joining us today to talk about spatial is Maor. How's it going?
Thank you for having me. Going amazing. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited for this. I've been looking forward to it. I know we had to reschedule some time, so I really appreciate you being flexible, and we're good to go. This is the first episode of Slice of Real Estate to kick off 2026.
And the best episode.
The best episode, yes, the
The
best
best
episode,
episode.
and not just because it's the first episode of the year. It's going to be the best episode for the year. It's going to be a high episode for other people to follow. High expectations. So
Good luck matching it again.
I love it. Let's dive right in. I'm kind of going back to my original approach. In the past episodes, I went more to a structured, and I was having the most fun with this is when I was just having coffee shop type conversations with founders, and I want to do the same thing with you. So for those listening that have never heard of Spatial before, what is your just basic explanation of what the company does, why you do it, and any peek into how you do it? You don't have to give us the secret sauce, but our audience would love to hear.
Happy to share. So to give it in a quick speech, we automating the entire process for single family homes, which means we let the architects being the creative nature they are, focus on the floor plan elevation, whatever you as an example as a homeowner wants to design for the house, programming bathrooms. And what we are doing, we're automating the entire structural engineering, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering, and also helping them to visualize everything and from 2D to 3D and validating against building codes. So we are their one-stop shop or one source of truth when they're creating a permit sets for single family homes.
And what was the process like before Spatial came into the space?
I'll summarize it in, so for example, structural engineering on hours. And then you have the MEP, and each one of the M, E, and the P is about 60 hours to create. And then you have a back and forth communication between the architects, those consultants, and then at some point also a builder needs to provide the price of how much it's going to cost to build the house that was designed. That loop takes on average 27 weeks until the plans are submitted to the city and then you have the permit approval. So if you want to look at it from abroad, you have 4 phases of the design. You have schematic and programming. Then you have design development, which is what we mentioned. Then you have the cost optimization, which is where the builder is getting involved. And then you have the permit set creation. Where we're getting involved is taking over phase 2, 3, and 4.
And at what point so everyone has their boiling point, right? As an entrepreneur, when they want to dive into a particular space, and it's not always, love at first sight. I want to go after, solve this problem. What I find is it usually is kind of maybe a slow burn. Sometimes it's like immediate, but what was your breaking point for, okay, I need to build this company. I can't stand to not build this business?
Started somewhere 20 years ago when I opened my first development and construction company. So I'm doing it for 20 years. In the past 13 years, it's really focused over here in California. I own but don't operate a construction company over here locally. And then I also are part of showrooms that sells everything you need to build a house. So there's 3 locations across California. And then in some point also I opened an architectural firm. So I always provided my clients with a one-stop shop experience. So being a builder, being an architect, and also the interior designer and the supply chain. And in every given project, you keep seeing the same issues. So for example, number 1 issue is that you don't have room to run ducts in the attic because the engineers and the architect and the MEP guy did not communicate in making sure that the system will fit in the existing house. New house. Other scenario, which happened to me a handful of times, is you like running the sewer lines because you have beams that blocking you. And if you're probably thinking about it, you stop by many homes and your friends and you see a soffit and you're thinking, oh, that looks nice. In many cases, that soffit is there because there is a sewer line there because they didn't have any room in the ceiling and they had to come up with a solution. So being a builder that suffered something as the average in the industry, 30% is rework and reorder of materials. My goal was always, how can I reduce it down? So by becoming a fully integrated, I went down to 15%. And then how can I target that 15%? And out of the 15%, what can be actually targeted by creating a special, where I came up with the idea, and what always going to stay. So the mistakes of the labor, the team will never change. That's about the 5% out of the 15 that got left. 10 is the collaboration and the creation of the permit set. That's how it started, somewhere in 2024.
And at the very earliest point, what was maybe a blocker that you kept running into that you eventually were able to get past? And you don't have to tell us if it's like a secret, right? How did you get past it? But if you could share some if there were just focusing on one blocker in the early days, how do you like what I talk with a lot of founders, it's how do you look at a blocker, break it down, and then decide because sometimes you can go around these blockers, other times you need to just go right through them, right? I had a healthcare company and sometimes there was some regulatory when it comes to credentialing you had to follow. So you couldn't necessarily go around everything. There were parts, but I'm not going to put any words in your mouth. I'd love to hear a big blocker in the early days and maybe how you went through it or around it.
So yeah, I can share about our POC, if you want to call it this way. You will probably think that our POC was how we solve in engineering. And actually our POC was different. It's how we can solve 2D to 3D first. Because if you can't show everything in a 3D, then you didn't really change the way the industry is working because everything is communicate multimedia files, at least for the builder side. Was can we do a design conflict detection? So making sure that after our AI designed it or our automation tools designed it, can they make sure that it's actually going to work in real life? When we solved those two, it's where we moved into engineering aspect. Because engineering is rules and values. To me, at least, it sounds like something that no matter what in some point you will find a solution for. And yes, took us a year to find a solution, but at least it's solvable ahead of time. 2D to 3D was the trickiest, and the design conflict and the code validation was also very tricky.
That's my favorite question to ask many founders. Because usually I get to see their eyes light up a little bit because like love the blockers, right? Don't turn away from them. That's something that becomes your early foundation points. You're gonna build off of that and build a great business. What I would love to hear from you as well. Let's talk a little bit. I don't want to be redundant. It seems like everyone talks about this these days. But how are you leveraging AI in your business? Talk about just even from the beginning days like when you first started the company in 2024, how are you leveraging AI versus how are you leveraging it today?
So from a company point of view, for the buzzword, we can say everything is AI. That's what everyone wants to see, to hear and see. But honestly, it's not. It's all about really automation and integration of different technologies to work together seamlessly. AI is there about 10 to 15% of the time, and there is a specific tool you're using it for, which is what it's great for. And we cannot really automate the entire structural engineering, as an example, or the entire MEP. It has to be a mix of different technologies, and that's how we're approaching it. From a personal perspective, AI is everywhere for me. Like every conversation, every spell check, every validation, or even thinking. So if before you used to talk to the mirror to run thoughts, now you have someone daily AI is just chat. But it's what for most people it is. So I see it as a tool that enabling us to do more. So you can say that we're replacing engineers, but we don't really replace engineers. We're automating their entire workflow. So we take in what used to take them 80 hours and reducing it depending on the time of the project to anywhere between 60 seconds because it's just simple, all the way to the max of 2 hours. So now he has another 78 hours free to be able to go get and gain more customers or play golf. So that's the way I like to look at AI compared to everyone else. Oh, we're going to get replaced. People are going to be out of a job.
So where does the human engineer still need to step in today?
So it's part of the, first of all, it's part of regulation. So you have to have a stamp by a licensed engineer on the set of plans for the city to accept it. So that's one of the process. So now when you're putting a human on a place that is taking liability, he has to review what was created by the AI, and that's what it's doing. And then sometimes it's finding a better way, also the automation. So it's roughly about 2 hours today, and it's coming from a place of security and fine tuning. You want to look at it this way.
And today you're focused on residential only, correct? And I know you have to pick a lane, right? But is there, I know there's additional complexity when you start to look at commercial and industrial real estate. Would you say some of that complexity is too high for current AI models today, or is that something that whether you're doing it or someone else is doing that, do you see that as part of the roadmap in the future?
So it doesn't really matter if it's single family or commercial from an AI technology. The AI technology is not there to solve everything yet. That's why I said it's a mix of technologies that we're using. So I prefer to call it automation. That's the really right way to look at it. From automation, you can solve commercial. The problem with commercial is it's a different type of industry. It means it's mostly unionized. They have their way to work and they want to make sure that people are staying employed and people can maximize the hours, as an example, when it comes to it. And then also the requirements from the builders are different. Now, why single family homes? For me, it's an industry that I'm used to. I always believe in creating businesses in place that you feel familiar with and you have experience. And that's why when I shared what I've done before, you can see that everything is under the same umbrella of industry, under the Omicron. And it's the biggest industry. United States almost. It's 1.6 million units getting built a year. and that's where we want to be. But yes, in some point, we're going to be able to branch into different niches.
And I want to talk a little bit too, because we're going to hit a bunch of different things as we kind of start to wrap up over the next 5-10 minutes or so. We're kind of hitting different buckets, right? Talking about things that the engineers would care about. What I also want to talk a little bit about is maybe some advice for founders out there, not necessarily competing with you, but that are out in real estate, the prop tech space. You recently was middle towards the end of last year, right? Raised a 10 million seed round led by TLV Partners. Congrats on that, by the way. I'm sure that was that team was excited about that. In a tough venture market for some, what was like the specific thing that you think got you over the edge with investors? And then what advice would you have to people, again, not competing directly with you, but that are looking to raise in a similar space at that seed, even pre-seed level to get things rolling?
So first of all, just covering the competition point of view, I don't really believe in competition. There is enough work for everyone, mostly in the construction industry. So happy to share knowledge and be able to help others and hopefully get help also at the same time. When it's coming to fundraising, the way to approach this is first of all, figure out your story. People trying to create a deck, which I've done also. So I'm sharing from my experience that mistakes that I've done. You're creating a deck that has too much information because you really want to show that you have the knowledge, but also you want to make sure the user actually understand what you're doing. But it needs to be the opposite. It needs to be a story that's engaging first because you want them to have a personal conversation with you. And then when you're telling your story, you need to show the issue, the present of the solution. You need to also show them the future where you're going into. But you don't want to focus on the future because if you show too much future, it shows that you're not focused. So you need to find your own balance in it. And then another mistake that also I've done, and then I fixed it, is make sure that you're going to the right venture capital firms that fitting your stage. So we think if a fund has 500 million, as an example, on the management right now, it will be a good for pre-seed. But it's not. It's too big for them, and you're just going to waste your time having conversation. So find the right partner for the right stage that's going to be able to move to the next stage, and it's okay to be able to grow.
If we look 5 years out from now, these next couple questions will be more focused on just future outlook. Thank you so much for that advice, by the way. I hope any entrepreneur is writing that down. And I love the piece of that you don't see like competition. There's enough space for everyone out there to kind of play their part in the ecosystem. Love that. Going to the next kind of question. If we look 5 years out, do you believe the role of a structural engineer changes from creator to reviewer? And I guess what does that mean for the next generation of civil engineering students? Like I hear a lot of students worried when they hear about how things are progressing. So would love to hear your point of view on that.
So yes, it's about they're going to become reviewers, but also they're going to be able to become a mix of civil engineer and a software engineer and be able to work on the future platforms by bringing both knowledges and by the R&D teams are both, which is amazing. Now start being more project managers. Because even if you have automations in the back end, you still need the humans on site. Someone needs to come and make sure that the builder build it the right way until to the point that everything going to be built in the factory. Then it's a completely different story, but we're not there yet. So you need the human or the engineers to be on site, validate everything is getting built, review those plans. So they're going to become more project managers. So they're going to have more social outdoor than just sitting in front of the computer. So from my perspective, it's great, but I'm not sure about if they like it or not.
Yeah, it's I think the students specifically, right, that want to kind of follow along with where the space is heading and get educated on kind of what that next wave will look like, they'll do well. The ones that don't want to adopt and think things will continue to remain the same, which there are some people like that, right? They may struggle a little bit.
I think
Last, what were you gonna say?
I think the best way for people is to 10 years ago and how they use their phone today. People will assume that phones industry not going to change, right? BlackBerry was that thing, but everything changed. Now your entire life and you're basically, you're walking my computer in your pocket. So same thing, everything will change.
Very true. No, thank you for adding that. Last two questions, kind of fun little questions I wanted to throw in here as we end. What's the most surprising thing, if you only had to pick one thing, you've learned about American building codes that would shock an outsider that is just learning about them?
How different they are between different states and how slow to be adopted between different states. So you have California that's right now in 2025 building codes. And then you have Texas that I'm not sure if they adopted 2022 already at this point, but they used to be in 2018 building codes. And then you have even states that are still running 2016 building codes. So that surprised me a lot. And then also see what states cares about. It's pretty much almost impossible to build foundation from a slab. So a slab foundation, it's usually going to be piers um, or tie beams compared to Texas that everything is on slab. So 4-inch slab pretty much pass. So it's just very interesting to see how it's one country, but it's completely separated at the same time. How builders needs to be able to adapt between different places. So that's why usually if you're a builder in California or just in California, and the only, I'll say the top 200, but mostly the top 10 can spread across different states.
Interesting. Yeah, it's crazy that we have such a gap between certain states when you were talking 2016 versus even some doing more modern, that can happen. I mean, it's the United States is kind of complicated because like we all of our states are like the size of like all the countries in Europe too, right? It is an interesting thing, and I'm sure when you were first diving in, you're used to it now, but an outsider would be kind of shocked to see how different it is state by state.
And some people like other states because it's less has less regulations, right? So there is a good and there is a bad to it. I personally am okay with regulations. Also, if I put my builder hat, some of those rules are amazing and the good are there. Like for example, in the Silicon Valley, but in most in California, the city come to inspect every portion of the building. So whatever is in the plans, there is a dedicated person from the city that come to the job sites and literally goes in the crawl space, goes in the attic, making sure that everything is built by the code and whatever was called ahead of time. When in Texas, you're hiring usually a third party firm to do the inspections for the builder, which we all know how it can work. But at the same time, when the house is done, you're hiring another third party inspector as the homeowner to come and inspect what was built. So there is good, there is bad at the same time. So as a builder, you can build faster in other places. And of course, you still do an amazing work. Where in California, because it's much more regulated, it can take slower, but there is a bigger environment here.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's what would you suggest for someone that wants to learn more about the code? Is there an early like we do have some students that end up listening. Is there any resources that you think they should check out to better become well versed in this space?
So everything is public information those days, and every city is using a different publisher. So you have American Legal as one of the publishers, and you have some, for example, Upcode is publishing a lot, building codes. But I will say that if there are students and they want to be able to really understand the code, they also need to start looking at it not just from a builder or from an architect or engineer perspective. They need to look at it from a legal perspective. So get the vision of a lawyer when you're reading those documents because it can be interpreted a different way.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing. Last question before we wrap up the episode today, kind of a fun one. If you could snap your fingers and remove one regulation from the US building code to make housing cheaper without sacrificing safety, what would it be if you had to pick one?
For going for cheaper and not to compromise safety, it will be the entire permit process. How to
Okay.
make this permit process faster and more efficient and not getting stuck on the things that no one really cares about when it's coming for safety or the right way to build. For example, in some cities over here, you will get comments of the color of the fascia and why it's not noted on the plans in all sides of the elevations. Like it makes sense. It's already noted on one side that it's going to be black. No one going to have a fascia for the house that is black, green, yellow. It's going to be one color. So they're getting stuck on stuff, and then the turnaround of the comments going back and forth with the cities can take months on it. And the other thing I will do is all the entitlement process should be much faster. There is no reason for entitlement to take sometimes 6 years. So if you want to look at it, a lot of different technologies or startups that are coming out there trying to reduce the cost of construction. But the problem is not necessarily the cost, it's the time equivalent to loans. We are trying to do is to reduce the time by automating the permit process and hopefully in some point get to the point that when the city the plans comes from us, they know it's validated ahead of time. But that's really what I will change. And I can add it to it a little bit too much energy calculations are going right now, mostly in California, that to a point that it's very hard to almost to get windows in the house because you're getting concealed by walls to get energy efficiency. So it needs to be some style split.
I like it. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast to kick off 2026, being the first episode of the new year. And look forward to future conversations. Let's definitely stay in touch. We're going to be doing a lot more content this year, some panels, which will be really exciting, maybe some live streams, and would love to have you be a part of it. So thanks so much and wishing you and the team all the best.
Yeah, I'll be happy to be part of it and show what we're doing also live. Thank you.
Thank you.